It was a busy morning at the airport. Passengers rushed to catch their flights, rolling suitcases behind them, talking on phones, sipping coffee. Among them walked a man. He was quiet, calm, and dressed in very simple clothes: an old blue shirt, faded jeans, and worn-out shoes. Nothing about him looked rich or important. His name was Mr. Jordan, but no one cared. As he walked toward the first-class check-in counter, a few people looked at him strangely. One couple even whispered, "Is he lost? Maybe he doesn't know where economy class is." But Mr. Jordan didn't say a word. He showed his ticket, first class. When he finally boarded the plane, the flight attendant, Rachel, was standing at the door. She had a bright smile on her face, but when she saw Mr. Jordan, her smile faded. She looked him up and down and said, "Sir, economy is at the back." Mr. Jordan simply showed her his first-class ticket. Rachel's eyes narrowed. She stepped aside and said coldly, "Oh, this way, then." He walked in silently. Some passengers turned their heads as he passed. One man chuckled. A woman raised an eyebrow. Everyone seemed confused. How could a man who looked so poor afford a first-class seat? Rachel didn't hide her feelings. As Mr. Jordan settled into his seat, she walked past him again and again, ignoring him. When she gave drinks to others, she skipped him. When she passed out snacks, she gave him the smallest one. Still, Mr. Jordan said nothing. He just looked out the window and smiled gently, as if he had seen this kind of treatment many times before. A young flight attendant named Mia noticed everything. She had only been working for a few months, and she was shocked by Rachel's behavior. During a quiet moment, Mia walked up to Rachel and whispered, "He's in first class. Why are you being like this?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "Come on, look at him. He probably got lucky with a free upgrade. You think someone like him can afford this seat?" Mia didn't reply, but she felt something wasn't right. Mr. Jordan pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and began to write something. His handwriting was neat, his hand steady. He paused now and then, looking around, then writing again. The passenger sitting beside him, an older gentleman in a suit, noticed the notebook. "Are you a writer?" he asked. Mr. Jordan smiled. "Not really. I just like writing down my thoughts." "Well, you're handling this very calmly," the man said, glancing toward Rachel. "That attendant hasn't been very kind to you." "I've seen worse," Mr. Jordan replied softly. "But respect, it's a small thing that means a lot." Mia brought him a glass of water and whispered, "I'm really sorry for how you've been treated." Mr. Jordan nodded politely. "Thank you. You've been very kind." The rest of the flight continued quietly. Rachel didn't bother him again. But Mr. Jordan kept writing, page after page. At one point, he looked at Rachel and then looked at his watch. He smiled to himself and closed the notebook. The plane began to descend. Most passengers started getting ready, fixing their hair, putting away blankets, checking their bags. Rachel looked out the window and sighed, ready for the flight to be over. She had already forgotten about the man in simple clothes. To her, he didn't matter. But the moment the plane landed, something happened that no one expected. Outside the window, a group of people in suits stood near the gate. They held a sign that read, "We'll see Mr. Jordan." Rachel noticed the sign and laughed. That must be for someone important. Then she saw Mr. Jordan stand up, pick up his small bag, and walk calmly toward the door. Maya looked surprised. So did the older man beside him. Rachel stared, frozen. And just like that, everything was about to change. Mr. Jordan walked off the plane slowly, carrying nothing but a small black bag and his notebook. His clothes were still plain, his steps calm and quiet. But the group of people waiting for him outside told a very different story. 5 men in suits stood near the gate. One of them held a white card that said, "Welcome, Mr. Jordan." As soon as they saw him, all 5 stepped forward and shook his hand with big smiles on their faces. Rachel, the flight attendant, watched everything from the doorway of the plane. At first, she thought she was dreaming. Was that really the same man? The one she ignored, the one she mocked for dressing too simple. Her smile disappeared. Passengers passing by looked at the scene in surprise. A few even stopped to stare. The man they had judged just an hour ago was now being treated like a king. Rachel turned to Mia. "Who is he?" Mia didn't answer. She just looked at Rachel, then walked away. Meanwhile, the airport staff escorted Mr. Jordan to a waiting car, a black luxury vehicle with tinted windows. The driver opened the door and greeted him with deep respect. Before getting in, Mr. Jordan turned around and looked back at the airplane. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply watched for a moment, then got into the car and drove away. The next day, at the Skyworld Airlines headquarters, a meeting was held in the top boardroom. All the company's top managers and executives were present. The mood was tense. Everyone had heard about the incident on Flight 205. Mr. Jordan entered the room quietly. He was now wearing a suit, simple but elegant. He sat at the head of the table. Everyone stood to greet him. This time, no one laughed. No one looked at his clothes. No one dared. Back at the airport, Rachel arrived for her morning shift. Her heart felt heavy. She couldn't stop thinking about what happened. She had mocked that man. She had judged him. But now, everyone was talking about him. At the staff room, she heard people whispering. "Did you hear? That man was the CEO of the airline." "Yeah, he owns Skyworld. The whole company." "No way." Rachel sat down slowly. Her hands shook. She remembered every moment. The fake smile, the rude words, the glass of water she brought late, the way she ignored his calls. She thought he was just a poor man. She thought she could treat him however she wanted. Now she knew the truth, and the truth hit hard. Later that afternoon, Rachel was called to the office. She knocked on the door with a trembling hand. "Come in," said a voice. Inside sat her supervisor, Miss Karen, with a serious look on her face. "Rachel," she began, "do you know who Mr. Jordan is?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes, Mom. I found out after the flight." Miss Karen looked at her with disappointment. "He is not just a CEO. He is the founder of Skyworld Airlines. He started this company from nothing. He worked day and night. And yesterday, you treated him like dirt." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know. I thought." "That's the problem," Miss Karen said. "You thought. You judged a man by his clothes, not by his actions, not by his heart." Rachel couldn't speak. "I don't know what will happen next," Miss Karen said. "But Mr. Jordan, he saw everything." That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She kept remembering his calm face, his quiet words, and how he didn't even defend himself. She had embarrassed him, but he had said nothing. Why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he tell her who he was? The answer hit her hard. Because he didn't need to. Meanwhile, Mr. Jordan sat in his office, reading through passenger reports, flight logs, and crew behavior records. On top of the stack was a report labeled, "Flight Attendant Behavior, Flight 205. He opened it and saw Rachel's name. He didn't look angry, just tired. Tired of people judging others too quickly. Tired of being looked down on because of clothes or age or skin. He closed the file and looked out the window. Tomorrow, he would make a decision. And that decision would change everything. The sun rose slowly over the city. Inside the Skyworld Airlines headquarters, the mood was quiet, almost tense. Everyone had heard by now. The man in simple clothes was not a lost passenger. He was Mr. Jordan, the founder and secret owner of the airline. And now, he was watching everyone. Rachel sat in the flight attendant's lounge, holding her coffee, but she couldn't drink. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes stared at the door, waiting, fearing. Every second felt heavy. Then her name was called. She stood up slowly and walked down the hallway to the main office. Every step felt like a drumbeat in her chest. She knew what was coming, or at least, she thought she did. Inside the room sat Mr. Jordan, calm, quiet, just like on the plane. But now, dressed in a clean gray suit, he looked powerful, like someone who had seen the world, felt pain, and still stood strong. Rachel stepped in. "Sir, Mr. Jordan raised his hand gently. "Please, sit down." She obeyed, lowering herself into the chair like a child in trouble. "I don't want an apology," he said softly. "I've heard many in my life." Rachel looked down. "I didn't know who you were." "That's the point," Mr. Jordan said. "Why should you need to know who someone is before treating them with kindness?" There was silence. Then he leaned forward, his voice still calm, but firm. "When I started this company, I was broke. I mopped floors at night and studied flight routes during the day. I cleaned toilets in the morning and helped load luggage in the afternoon. No one knew me. No one cared." He paused, looking straight into her eyes. "And back then, people treated me the same way you did." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, sir." "I know," he said, "but sorry doesn't fix everything. You are a face of this company. You carry our name, our values. And when you judge someone based on clothes, you don't just insult them, you insult us." Later that day, Mr. Jordan called a meeting with all senior staff and flight crew. It was unusual for the owner himself to hold a team meeting. Everyone gathered in the large hall, whispering, wondering what would happen. Mr. Jordan stood at the front, holding his old notebook, the same one he carried on the flight. "I want to tell you all a story," he began. And then, he told the story of Flight 205. He didn't use Rachel's name. He didn't shame anyone directly. But his words were sharp and clear. "I walked on that plane as a test. I wanted to see how my company treats strangers. People with no suit, no money, no fame." He looked across the room. "And I learned something sad." The room was silent. He opened his notebook and read the final line he wrote during the flight. "True respect is not shown to the rich. True respect is shown to those you think have nothing." A few people looked down. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then he said, "From this day forward, we will not judge passengers by their clothes, their accent, or the money in their wallet. We will treat every person with dignity. That is who we are. That is Sky World." The room clapped. But Rachel didn't clap. She just cried softly. Because she knew he was talking about her. After the meeting, Mr. Jordan walked through the airport alone, wearing simple clothes again. A young janitor passed by and nodded respectfully. Mr. Jordan smiled. He remembered where he came from. He remembered what it felt like to be invisible. And he had made a promise. No one in his company would ever feel that way again. Meanwhile, Rachel walked out of the building and sat on a bench. Mia sat next to her and put a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Maya asked. Rachel nodded slowly. "He could have fired me. He could have shouted. But he didn't." "No," Maya said. "He gave you something stronger." Rachel looked up, confused. "What?" Mia smiled. "A second chance." Rachel stood in front of the mirror, her uniform neat, and her name tag shining. But something felt different today. She wasn't just dressing for work. She was preparing for something bigger. It had been 2 days since Mr. Jordan's speech. The message still echoed in her heart. True respect is not shown to the rich. True respect is shown to those you think have nothing. Those words had changed her. At the airport, Rachel walked through the terminal with a new sense of awareness. She smiled at the janitor who was sweeping the floor. She helped an old lady find her gate. She spoke kindly to a nervous traveler who couldn't find his boarding pass. People noticed. Mia, her coworker, watched from a distance and smiled. "Looks like someone's heart woke up." Rachel looked over and smiled softly. I just don't want to be that person again. Later that day, Rachel received an unexpected message on her phone. Report to Gate 17 at 3 p.m. Special flight crew assignment. Her heart skipped. She hadn't signed up for any special flights. Still, she followed the order. At Gate 17, a man in a wheelchair was being pushed slowly toward the counter. His clothes were old, his shoes worn. Most people walked past him without a glance. But not Rachel. She walked up to him, kneeled down, and smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, sir. My name is Rachel. I'll be taking care of you today." The man looked up, surprised. You don't mind." "Why would I?" she said gently. "You're my guest." He smiled, and for a moment, his tired eyes sparkled. Rachel helped him to his seat, brought him water without being asked, and adjusted his blanket when he looked cold. Other passengers watched silently. Something felt different about Rachel. She wasn't just doing her job, she was living the lesson. In the back of the plane, a man watched her closely. It was Mr. Jordan. He had come on the flight quietly, once again dressed in plain clothes. He didn't want attention. He wanted to see if change had really happened. And he saw it. Every smile, every kind gesture, every respectful word. He quietly pulled out his notebook and wrote, "She has changed, not because of fear, but because she understood." When the flight landed, Rachel helped the man in the wheelchair off the plane. He held her hand tightly and said, "Thank you, young lady. You made me feel human." Tears filled Rachel's eyes. "That means everything to me, sir." As she turned around, she saw Mr. Jordan standing near the gate. This time, he didn't walk past. He stepped forward, smiled, and said just one word. "Well done." Rachel's eyes widened. "Sir." Mr. Jordan nodded. "You didn't do it for me. You did it because your heart is finally in the right place." She took a deep breath, holding back tears. "I'll never forget the lesson you taught me." He smiled. "Then teach it to others." A week later, Skyworld Airlines released a new campaign called Dignity for All. It featured real stories, real passengers, and real crew members. And at the heart of the video was Rachel. She stood in her uniform and looked into the camera. "I used to judge people. I thought success looked expensive. But then I learned the truth. Respect isn't about money or clothes. It's about kindness." The campaign went viral. Thousands of people commented, saying the video gave them hope. Others shared stories of being judged or misunderstood. Some even admitted they used to judge, just like Rachel. It was a bright morning. Rachel walked into the Skyworld Airlines office with a smile on her face. Life had changed. She had changed. People now greeted her with respect, not because of her job, but because of her kindness. But today was different. There was a large meeting called by the company. Everyone was invited. Pilots, flight attendants, cleaners, and staff from all departments. Rachel found her seat and sat beside Mia. "Do you know what this is about?" Rachel asked. Mia shook her head. "No idea. But I heard Mr. Jordan will speak again." Just then, the lights dimmed. A soft video started playing on the big screen. It was a short documentary about a man who once walked into his own airline, dressed in the simplest clothes. The video showed secret camera clips from the plane. Mr. Jordan sitting quietly, Rachel ignoring him, others laughing behind his back. Rachel's heart dropped. She looked around. People were watching in shock. But then, the video changed. It showed how she later helped the old man in the wheelchair, how she smiled, how she treated him with warmth. Then Mr. Jordan's voice spoke. "One person can change. One heart can grow. And sometimes, the ones who fail us first become the ones who leave us later." The screen turned black. Then the lights came back on. Mr. Jordan stood at the front of the hall, holding a golden envelope. He looked around the silent room and smiled gently. "I started this company with one goal, to treat people with respect, no matter who they are. But that goal was lost over time. I had to remind myself, and all of you, what real dignity looks like. He opened the envelope. Today, I want to announce a new position, one that will help train, guide, and shape the future of Skyworld Airlines. The position built on kindness, growth, and redemption. He paused, and that role will be given to someone who proved that second chances are real. He looked straight at Rachel. "Rachel Walker, will you please come forward?" Her breath stopped. Everyone turned to look at her. Mia whispered, "Go. That's you." Rachel slowly stood up, her hands shaking. She walked to the front, her eyes filled with tears. Mr. Jordan smiled warmly. "You went from mocking a stranger to becoming the reason a man in a wheelchair felt seen. That's not just growth, it's leadership." He handed her the envelope. "This is your new role, Director of Guest Experience and Human Values. You'll travel, speak, and train others to do what you did. Treat every person with respect." Rachel covered her mouth, crying softly. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." He leaned forward and whispered, "Just promise me. You'll never forget the man in simple clothes." She nodded, still crying. "Never." Later that evening, Rachel stood alone in the airport, watching the sunset from the window. The janitor passed by, sweeping quietly. This time, she smiled, walked up to him, and offered a bottle of water. He looked surprised. "You don't have to." She smiled. "I know, but I want to."